What up, peoples? I love good sound. I love good quality sound when it comes to music, and I've become a little obsessive over the years. I've gone through phases where I'm really into speakers and equipment, and then I'll fade out for a while and be like, man, happy with what I have. Lately, I've been on kind of one of my musical excursions, but I'm not looking for better sound so much as far as the audiophile, the idea that buying a $10,000 speaker set is going to be better than my couple $100 speakers. But let's just put it this way: there seems to be that last 10% of quality is what costs 90% of the money. So if you're content with what you have, then and it depends on what your source material is too. If you're listening to if you just listen to podcasts, for example, do you really need a super fancy headphones? If you're a musician, what type of music do you listen to, and what type of speakers will accommodate for your style of music? When I was into my acoustic music phase, which has a lot of mid-range sound, I found that using a pair of my old Sansui speakers was the best, and that's because they have two 4-inch mid-ranges on it, which I don't know what they did to those particular speakers, but they have a phenomenal sound for acoustic guitar. But then you go and you try to play some rap or some metal on it, and it just doesn't sound the same. So the other day I picked up a pair of these Bic Venturi speakers. Now, Bic is an American company that made speakers from the 70s on up through the 90s. Now I bought two pairs over the past 10 years of these, I think they're like V52 or something. I think it's V52, but they're just little bookshelf speakers. And I grabbed a pair for like 10 bucks at Goodwill one day. Took them home, hooked them up. Didn't expect anything miraculous, I was just blown away. I mean, I had to go back and forth between all these different speaker sets to say, wait a minute, this is a time where I truly was impressed by the sound of a speaker, not because of the price tag or how fancy it looked or whatever anyone told me, but expecting just a half-assed sound and getting something amazing. So I kept an eye out for those over the years, and I read a few audiophile forums where people were like, hey, why don't more people talk about these speakers? They sound so amazing to me. And the conclusion is always, hey, if they sound good to you, then great, keep them. So I think one pair broke, so I have one good pair of those. And the other day I went down to Goodwill, and the shelf, these are only like, 12 inches tall. Went down to Goodwill and I saw a pair of Bic Venturi V802s, which were about 3.5 feet high. I was just blown away. Couldn't believe it. I was like, I know these are high quality, and once again, it's the same thing. Everybody's like, why doesn't anybody talk about these? So anyhow, the point being is that to me, it's all about the quality of the sound, but the source material is really important too. And probably the most crucial thing, besides your speakers, your room size, and all this to getting the right sound in your stereo, what is overlooked is source material. If your music is recorded with crappy quality, then it's going to sound crappy no matter what you do to it. There was something that happened during the day of CD. It was called the Loudness Wars, and this went up through I believe, through the 80s and 90s. And the idea was to compete to compress and pack as much music as you could onto the CD, tape, whatever. And this was done by filling basically every empty space and adjusting the levels to where they balance out. You ever notice back in the old days, it's kind of like when a commercial comes on, for example, and it's louder than the television. Or, well, that happens in music, but it's purposeful. That the music, especially older music, like symphony and like orchestra music, is designed to make you want to turn it up, but knowing that you can't because in about 10 seconds it's going to go crazy. That's part of the music. And in the 60s and 70s, a lot of the rock music followed that pattern. That they wanted to give you the emphasis on the silence and the quiet parts. And today you just don't hear that. They've completely all but eliminated silence in songs. And it takes me back to the 90s when I heard a quote from somebody. I don't recall who it was, but it stuck with me. He said, it's not the beats, or it's not the sounds within the music that really move us, it's the space between them, which completely made sense to me. It's the anticipation of the next beat. A good example of this would be the song Walk by Pantera. Dun, 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 dun. And anybody who knows that song knows that that silence and that space between those beats is something that makes the song what it is. So I could talk about different musics, but of course every one of you have different styles of music that you listen to. And I actually made a video yesterday about rap music. I decided not to upload it. I quit halfway through. I was like, what's the point? It was along the idea that you may not look at me and think I listen to rap, but I grew up listening to Snoop Dogg. Hell, I listened to MC Hammer, NWA, you know, Eazy-E. All of these rappers, you know, some of them sucked. Many of the lyrics sucked. Some of the beats sucked. But a majority of it was, I guess a lot of raps were written with actual lyrics in mind. And then today, we fast forward, you know, to 25 years later, and we have rappers like this guy named Lil Yachty, which I hadn't even heard of before. But I thought I might as well listen to some modern rap and hip-hop before I made an assessment about, you know, oh, the kids these days. Because it's not just getting older. It's the fact that music really does suck. And I could say that a lot of people say, well, everybody thinks the music we had when we were young was the best, but I never did. I actually grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I was always looking back to the 60s and 70s saying they had good music. In retrospect, I realized there was a lot of great music in the 80s, but it seems like today rap and hip-hop, for example, which is like the more mainstream, it has kind of taken the place of, well, it's intermingled with pop to the point where it's hard to even tell the difference, but the lyrics are just horrific. The one line that somebody pointed out from a song, I think it was that Lil Yachty guy, and he said something like, you know, she wants to blow me like a cello or something, and the guy who was writing the article said, dude, a cello is a fucking string instrument, you idiot. You're gonna take the time to write lyrics about blowing you like a cello, at least use a fucking flute. I mean, and you know, I'm not saying that it was any better in the past. I actually enjoyed listening to ICP, Insane Clown Posse. Their lyrics were horrific, but they made me laugh, and their beats were good. I couldn't help it. There was one of the worst rappers of all time was Too Short. Too Short had some of the greatest beats, but his lyrics were the worst rap lyrics that I could even imagine of any of the mainstream, like, famous, you know, artists. But I can't compare it to anything today. If I wanted to go with the metal of today, you know, I don't listen to heavy metal anymore like I used to, but I was a big metalhead back in the 90s, and I love good metal, you know. Pantera, Megadeth, Metallica, of course, you know, all the mainstreams, Tool. But I wasn't a huge fan of death metal or blah, 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 blah. It just wasn't my thing. I love Slayer, but, you know. So, and that's one of the things about music and being into music. I'm a musician too. I play guitar, I play bass. I enjoy listening to all styles of music and playing all styles of music. And hell, I went from my metal phase, you know, I went into, from rap into the metal, and kind of was always listening to both of them at the same time through the late 80s and early 90s. Then I got into the Grateful Dead, fell into my hippie phase with like Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, and Grateful Dead, and Jimi Hendrix, which was like my idol. And then as I got older, I started listening to, as I grew up in the era of the birth of electronica. So to me, the Chemical Brothers, Propeller Heads, these were some of the early expeditions into electronic sound. And some of it was pretty good, and some of it was pretty repeating and boring. But today, and this is kind of the, I guess the pinnacle of music is electronica being able to intertwine itself. Electronica today is doing what rap failed to do. Rap took samples and cuts, and, you know, especially samples from older songs, which would mean in the middle of a rap song you could have a sample which would bring forth that emotion that comes from that old song. Or you could even make a song about something completely different, but then throw in a line from an old song which would give the person an idea of what you're trying to convey in the song. Then samples just became the lazy rapper's way to make music. So in other words, instead of making your own beat and putting a sample in there, today they just take samples and sample the whole way through, and that's garbage. And then they take these lyrics that are written in the bathroom with a hangover or something. I mean, who the hell comes up with these things? But people like it. And I gotta bite my tongue to say, oh, the kids today, because really it is shit, you know? All the rap and hip-hop today is just shit, except the underground stuff. And I've always loved stuff like Diggable Planets back in the 90s. They were phenomenal. Deltron, Del the Funky Homo Sapien. There were quite a few, but more obscure. And so the impact and the meaning of the music is important. But electronica kind of picked up the slack and said, well, we can do this. We can take samples and turn them into songs where it's not about taking the song or stealing the music, but rather, if you're in the middle of if you're a DJ, you're composing your own set, and you come up with, not a DJ, but an electronic creator, because I know that electronic artists they put in a lot more work than the average band member. Let's just put it that way. Electronic music in my day was a joke. People were saying, oh, look at these guys, they have a Moog synthesizer and they hit a few keys and the beats and that's the music. That's not art. But have you ever tried to put together an electronica song by yourself? I have, and it's fucking hard. It's hard to get a good beat that sounds good and then to do all the mixes and blends, and it's usually one guy doing it. So you have one guy playing all the instruments, and today there are so many different components that you can use. And then there's bands like Papadosio, which have entwined, his Moog synthesizers and all of his synth work into the music, and it becomes a new style of music, if you will. The subgenres of music have just gotten extreme, so I don't try to define them anymore. I listen to what I like, and if I like it, I like it. An example is, maybe 10 years ago or something, I heard Britney Spears' Toxic, and I liked the song. So I listen to it once in a while, and I remember my wife just laughing at me, like, you actually like this song? I can't help it if I like something. And most of the people that I grew up with, we know what we like, but there were also plenty of people who follow trends, wouldn't dare admit that they like something mainstream, or that they don't like something like blues. Good example. I say, I listen to ICP, but I don't like listening to blues. People would be like, what? That's just absurd. To me, it's because blues is too predictable. I know what to expect. And I've realized after thinking about this a lot that that's the exact thing that other people do like. We like predictability. This is why country has a format, blues has a format. Jazz can go kind of off the rails, and then people like, whoa, that's, it's not following a format. Well, electronica can go everywhere. So people feel like they can't attach to the song, but you can. You just have to like it. And so it's all about what you like. If you find what you like, and don't be embarrassed about what you like, and then find a good stereo system to listen to it on. That's the key. Actually, I have these sitting here. These I picked up at Goodwill the other day. I talked the manager into making them like $7 or something, because one of the sides was broken. And they're nice Philips noise-canceling headphones. I think they were like $200 new. So I got them for like $7, and if you've ever listened to a pair of cheap headphones, and then a pair of just somewhat decent headphones even, I know I'm getting all into the sound, but that's what I'm all about. So there's my ramble about sound and music. Hope you enjoyed it. Talk to y'all later. As always, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. What's your favorite music? What are your experiences with speakers and amplifiers and all that stuff? Because I know at least a couple of you are probably audiophiles. So Goodwill is where I get my audio equipment most of the time. Because there's always somebody who just has to have the latest and the greatest, and that leaves something that's late and great enough for me. Peace out.